Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday, October 8th. I'm Brandis Friedman. Coming up on Chicago Tonight, a North Shore land deal raises questions, the debate over reopening some city mental health clinics, and Chicago's version of Fall Fashion Week. But first, tonight, just hours ago, the White House told the House of Representatives it's refusing to cooperate with the impeachment inquiry, calling it unconstitutional and illegal. It comes after President Donald Trump blocked the U.S. ambassador to the European Union from testifying before House committees. It also comes on the heels of a rare show of bipartisanship as lawmakers slammed the president's decision to reduce military support for a key Middle East ally. Joining us to talk about all that and more is Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat who represents Illinois' 5th District and serves on the House Intelligence Committee. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight, Congressman.
Glad to be back. Thanks.
So we just heard the White House counsel this afternoon sending a letter to formally tell the House that they should not expect any cooperation or participation in this inquiry. Does that change anything?
No. I've been part of this investigation for 3 years. It's almost 3 years ago to the day when I was first told that the Russians were attacking our democratic process. The White House has done nothing but obstruct that investigation. I think it was clear in reading the special counsel's report that he outlined the details of the president's obstruction. After the report was issued, I think they heightened that effort to block whatever was taking place. And obviously the issue with Ukraine, they attempted to block the complaint coming to the House or the complaining witness. And of course, today they started canceling appearances by State Department personnel.
Does this make it more difficult to gather information to investigate?
It makes it extremely difficult. As the Russian investigation went forward, and this part of the investigation, Ukraine, it is literally like one hand behind your back effort. It is extraordinarily difficult when people are told they don't have to answer questions or only part of those, and they block all documents. So in the end, this becomes largely a fight within the public purview and in the courts.
The White House today also blocked the ambassador to the European Union from testifying. What had you hoped to hear from him?
You know, seemingly there's a lot of questions to ask any Trump associate in this. What did you know? What did you learn? What did you communicate? And clearly, this is the conduit between President Trump's orders and request of our Ukrainian allies to muscle them. So this was the conduit, this ambassador, between those career diplomats and Ukraine. But I think what I'd ask all the Trump associates is, why aren't you the whistleblower? At what point didn't you think that this was disgusting behavior, muscling an ally, currently engaged in a hot war with our greatest adversary, Russia? At some point, didn't you say, perhaps we shouldn't do it? In the text that we read last week, we only got a glimmer of that. Why wasn't this ambassador involved?
Now, the House has also subpoenaed Ambassador Sondland. Will he testify?
I guess I'd have to be optimistic just because I want this investigation to go forward. But given past records, I would anticipate he would refuse to answer even under a subpoena, and this will end up in court as well.
So what will it take to persuade Republicans in Congress, who for the most part have been very supportive of the president, particularly in the Senate, to support impeachment and if it possibly means removing the president from office?
Sure. You know, a couple things. I think we've seen a little bit of the cracks and the fissures here. First, with the president's foreign policy decisions that you have referenced. I think we saw it last week as well when the Senate said unanimously that they had to turn over this the whistleblower's complaint. But I don't know that I'll ever expect the president's base to turn from him and therefore the Senate. To a large degree, we have to ask ourselves, who's the jury here? And I think it's the American public. What we've seen recently is the American public, the majority believes the investigation should go forward, and more believe the president should be impeached.
Last week, former Ukraine envoy Kurt Volker testified for some 9 hours. What did you learn there? Anything useful?
I think the texts are extraordinarily useful. The president has questioned the process. He's questioned the whistleblower, called the whistleblower a traitor and treasonous, and that none of this is true. It's a hoax. Well, then ask yourself, why did they do so much to cover it up? Why did they hide this phone call with Zelensky in a secret server? Why did they try to fight this all the way? I think what we learned last week is the text show us that the whistleblower was exactly right. It is a blueprint for this investigation to go forward. The President of the United States actually was involved in the process to make what is normal to support our allies militarily conditioned on a White House visit and whether or not they were going to get military aid. Whether or not there was a quid pro quo doesn't mean it wasn't wrong or illegal, but there was a quid pro quo, and I think those texts bear it out.
Volker reportedly said that the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is feeding the president misinformation on Ukraine. Truth to that?
I don't know what Rudy Giuliani is doing. Under my questioning, the head of our intelligence community, the acting DNI, said he doesn't know if Rudy has security clearance and he doesn't know what Rudy is doing. Is Rudy acting as a self-dealer, helping the campaign, as his personal attorney, or working under the State Department? That is a mishmash of foreign policy, but I'm concerned that it reinforces the realization that this president was out to help himself and force an ally to do something they didn't want to do.
Do you think impeachment will hurt Democrats' chances in 2020? For example, Democrats who may be in districts that are more vulnerable than previously.
I think that there are difficult votes for Democrats in swing districts, districts that are solidly pro-Trump otherwise. And I respect that issue. But I do think we have to go forward because the president has never been held accountable in his life for anything he has done wrong. If you look at the date of this conversation with the Ukrainian president, it is right after Special Counsel Mueller testified before the House. The president references Mr. Mueller in his transcript. And I think it means that he feels he can commit bigger and better crimes. And he will continue to do this. You've seen it pivot from their defense, that this is a hoax, to now, yeah, there was a call and it was perfectly okay, and that's why we're not going to cooperate.
In recent days, the president's also decided to defy military advice and pull troops from the Syrian border with Turkey, potentially leaving the Kurds, who have been a U.S. ally, a key in the fight against ISIS, leaving them vulnerable. Do you think this is an attempt to distract the public and lawmakers?
Oh, absolutely, and it's not the first effort to distract and deflect. It was something that took place during all the Russian investigation. What concerns me most about this, and there's a long list, is the impulsive quality to it. The fact that the United States military was blindsided by an action of the President of the United States in the front lines of the battlefield against ISIS ought to scare every American, Democrat or Republican.
In a rare show of bipartisanship, though, lawmakers have come out against this decision. Do you think we'll be seeing more of this kind of bipartisanship in the coming months?
I've seen just little bits of profiles encouraged by the Republicans. Often it's because of a foreign policy decision that they disagree with. I think they feel emboldened that they can do that. Often, or too often, we see these profiles encouraged come from Republicans who are either gone from Congress or are about to leave. Now's the time for them to step up on his foreign policy decisions, on what we're seeing him, an attack on the rule of law.
Congressman Mike Quigley, thank you again for joining us.
Anytime.
And we're back with news of a controversial land deal involving a high-ranking state politician right after this.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by ComEd, powering lives.
We have a tremendous source of untapped, efficient energy right here in our school.
Let her rip, Jenny.
I kind of love this idea.
The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program has real ideas for making schools energy efficient.
Pedal faster.
A controversial land deal on the North Shore tied to Illinois Senate President John Cullerton is under scrutiny. The deal would allow a private developer and his financial partner, John Cullerton, to build a road on a public golf course leading to a private property they jointly own, and it has neighbors upset. Now it's raising questions about whether Cullerton is using political clout for financial gain. Paris Schutz has the story.
Canal Shores is an 82-acre public golf course that runs through Evanston and Wilmette. Wilmette Park District Commissioner Brian Abbott says the course is a valuable public space for local residents.
People come here, they walk, they hike, their dogs. Golfers help subsidize the management of this land.
Directly to the west of Hole 10, on the border of Evanston and Wilmette, is an undeveloped piece of private residential property that has had one nagging problem. There is no way to access it from the nearest roads. The property has been in the family of Glencoe resident Joe Keefe for 30 years. The Keefe's longtime friend, Illinois Senate President John Cullerton, also has a financial stake in the land. Keefe says he and Cullerton have tried unsuccessfully for years to get the local park districts to grant them an easement to build a road or driveway to their property, and he says they are owed that.
It's a fundamental to real estate law in Illinois that if you pay property tax on a property, you're owed access to it.
The golf course sits on land owned by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. Keefe and Cullerton eventually persuaded the Cook County Transportation and Highway Superintendent to in turn ask the MWRD to vote to grant an easement for the property. The first attempt had the route going from the south, from Isabella Road in Evanston. MWRD commissioners, amid intense opposition from neighbors, voted it down. In November of last year, Cullerton and Keefe tried again, this time with a route that would go from Maple Road in Wilmette to the north. The public opposition was near unanimous at a contentious board meeting.
Please say no. Please continue to protect our public lands.
Please don't let this community gem be raped for the benefit of a few well-connected people who have no true connection to the neighborhood.
But this time, MWRD commissioners voted 5-4 to approve the easement, which would run through hole number 10 and effectively turn Canal Shores into a 17-hole golf course. The commissioners voting yes said they didn't want to deny a private developer access to their property and that they shouldn't tell the Cook County Highway Department that it can't build a road. But those voting no said it amounted to giving away valuable public space to enrich private developers. Cullerton himself lobbied commissioners to support the easement, although they say he made clear to them that he was doing it in his capacity as a private lawyer and not as state Senate president. Opponents to the easement deal say it's a case of a powerful public official personally asking other public officials for a vote that would benefit him financially.
He personally lobbied the MWRD commissioners, and I feel for the pressure that they must have felt when the Illinois president, the Senate president, comes in and talks to them on what he insists is a private deal.
Public officials are permitted to own private property. John has been circumspect in this and careful as much as any attorney I've ever been involved with.
Cullerton lists the land interest on his official state economic disclosure form. MWRD commissioners we spoke with say there was never anything promised in return for a favorable vote. Former Commissioner Ken Duncan was a yes vote, but told us over the phone that he was wary when Cullerton first approached him about it. "I don't give a damn about making Cullerton wealthy," Duncan told WTTW News, "but government should not impede access to someone's property." Abbott says he doesn't think any of this passes the smell test.
It certainly doesn't look good. And that's what I think has people upset. I don't write the laws. I do know who does write the laws.
Before the vote, the land was worth virtually nothing. Now it's up for sale for $1.25 million. The listing agent in line for a commission is Garrett Cullerton, John Cullerton's son. Both Keefe and Cullerton say that, too, should not raise any eyebrows.
Garrett's very talented. It wouldn't make any sense for us to go to somebody we don't know if we have someone we do know.
Cook County's independent inspector general investigated a complaint in 2018 alleging there was bribery involved in the early stages of the easement talks. The IG concluded that the allegation was unfounded. But sources tell WTTW News that the inspector general, which also has oversight over the Water Reclamation District, is still probing other aspects of the deal. Keefe says he's still open to other solutions, as long as the stakeholders let up on their relentless opposition.
It concerns me that forces will combine to say you are not allowed, or we're going to try to inhibit or prohibit you from developing your property the way any homeowner would do.
And the board president of the Canal Shores Golf Course said to us in a statement, quote, "While we disagree with the need for an easement adjacent to our 10th hole, we remain committed to working towards a solution that balances the interests of all parties." Now, we spoke with several commissioners on each side of this issue who refused to be interviewed on camera for this story. Former Commissioner Ken Duncan, who we quoted in there, first agreed to an on-camera interview, but then later pulled out. We also spoke at length with State Senator John Cullerton over the phone, but he too did not agree to go on camera for this story.
So, Paris, where does this easement plan stand now?
Well, it is past the Water Reclamation Board, so it right now is in the Cook County government. Cook County Department of Transportation is currently surveying the land, and they'll come up with the specifics of what that roadway or that driveway is going to look like. And then there's some confusion as to whether Cook County Board Commissioners have to vote on it again, or they can just start doing construction on it.
Now, you said you spoke with Senate President Cullerton on the phone at length. What did he have to say about this?
He did. We talked to him on the phone. He said he's been a family friend with the Keefes and with this business for about 40 years. He had a stake in this property before he was State Senate President. He reiterated to us that he told the commissioners that he was not talking to them in his capacity as State Senate President, that he was acting as a private landowner and a private attorney. He also said that he had to push these municipal governments to take this vote, or else he and Keefe would have to sue, because they say Illinois law states that if you are a property owner, you have a right to access your property. So lawsuit would have been the last route, and they wanted to go this route.
So how did commissioners go from opposing the first proposal to supporting the second one?
Well, and the opposition to the first proposal was unanimous, 9-0 against it. And then the second proposal, they voted in favor of it, 5-4. And all sides agree the second proposal was even more obstructive. So that's the million-dollar question. Why did these commissioners change their minds? The ones we spoke to over the phone said they simply didn't believe it was government's job to tell a private landowner that you can't have access to your property. Obviously, that decision does not go over very well with some of the Park District members and the neighbors there. So there are lots of questions from those involved as to whether there was anything else promised by the Senate President or by Mr. Keefe in exchange for those votes. There's no evidence that has surfaced thus far that that's the case.
Okay, Paris, thank you. Up next, the debate over reopening the city's 6 shuttered mental health clinics.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by North Shore University Health System.
What does it mean to care for someone? To heal? At North Shore, we're driven to understand bodies on a molecular level. But to truly treat you, we need to listen to what you say and what you don't say. Only by understanding you, inside and out, can our team of specialists determine the best path of care for you. We call it the science of understanding, and that's healthcare for what's next.
As candidate for mayor, Lori Lightfoot campaigned on a promise to reopen the 6 mental health clinics closed by her predecessor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel. But her nominee for public health commissioner may have other ideas to address mental illness, and it's upsetting for some members of city council. Last week, aldermen questioned Dr. Allison Arwadi's stance on reopening those clinics, and for now, it is stalling her nomination. But that city hall showdown begs the question, is it time to reopen the 6 mental health clinics, or might there be a better approach to treating mental illnesses? Here with 2 very different perspectives are Alexa James, a clinical social worker and executive director of the Chicago chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. James also co-chaired Mayor Lightfoot's Health and Human Services Transition Committee. And Arturo Carrigo, a clinical social worker and program manager of St. Anthony Hospital's Community Wellness Program, which provides free mental health care services to Chicago's Southwest and West Side communities. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you for having us.
So let's start with what happened in City Council last week. Allison Arwadi, the interim public health commissioner, saying that she did not think that it was the best answer to reopen those closed mental health clinics, and her nomination has since been stalled. Alexa James, let's start with you. Where do you stand on what happened to Dr. Arwadi's nomination there?
I mean, I care about Dr. Arwadi. I think that she has shown tremendous leadership. What I'm really thinking about is what is the city going to do to create a system of care for mental health conditions, or for people living with mental health conditions, right? I think that the conversation and the focus on reopening these clinics is tired at this point, and I think that we are missing an opportunity to really think about a big picture and a comprehensive system change. This is about reform. This is about making sure that every single person in the city is met with the resources that they need, not just folks who are able to walk into a clinic or have access, right? We need to think much bigger, and I think that this is the time, and I'm concerned that the politicizing around these issues is going to stall people's access to really get well and heal our communities.
Arturo Carrillo, what do you think about what happened to Dr. Arwadi's nomination last week?
Yeah, I think the alderman made a very courageous decision to slow down the conversation. You know, I think Dr. Arwadi was testifying in January on this very same issue, and was very clear that, you know, the correct action was taken to close the clinics. Now, you know, the aldermen are revisiting this issue, as many of them campaigned on this issue, as the mayor campaigned on this issue. You know, the question here is, you know, what role does the mental health clinics, the public mental health clinics, have in the landscape of mental health access in Chicago? So the question begs to be asked: how and where can clinics be reopened to increase access when there's severe disparities in the city when it comes to care?
In your work, have you seen access to mental health clinics be impeded by longer wait times or longer travel times?
Yes, absolutely. You know, part of our services are offering free long-term trauma-focused care in low-income communities that do not have access otherwise. You know, we have parts of the city that have upwards of 30, 40, in the Loop area, 300 therapists per 1,000 community residents. Most of the city is covered by 0.1 therapist per 1,000 community residents. There's an enormous disparity that's been there for generations. Part of what we're looking to do and access and offer this free access is to provide those free services in communities that need it most, and we have a year-long wait list at this moment.
Have you seen an overflow of patients then who live in communities that don't have access to mental health care?
Yes, absolutely. One of the areas in which we were serving back at the Yards had one of those clinics closed on 44th and Ashton. So, you know, part of what we're trying to do is plug an enormous hole. You know, St. Anthony Hospital offers these services for free in the community because it's part of its mission. However, we do see ourselves as part of a bigger ecosystem, that is offering insufficient care for communities that have been devastated by trauma, the lasting impacts of complex trauma in people's lives and within their families. So, you know, we think about integrated care as a model that offers access to mental health services within social service deliveries, within community settings, within therapists that are providing free, culturally appropriate care. And all of that has to be part of a bigger plan that does include the public mental health clinics.
Alexa James, I see you over here nodding your head. What have you seen as a result of some of these clinics closing?
Well, we also have to remember that during the context of the clinics closing, we also had a budget impasse, right? So we can't forget the fact that, like, we were hemorrhaging staff and talent and capacity. We run a helpline. We've already fielded 4,500 calls this year to help coordinate people fighting, trying to negotiate the system. The wait lists are enormous. We are not fighting against capacity building. For us, it's not about who is providing the treatment. We have to expand it. This is about making sure that people aren't waiting a year to get help and that we're not operating only from a crisis system. And right now, the city is really operating from a crisis system where first responders are the mental health practitioners, right, that are linking people to hospitalizations. We have to think bigger, but we also have to not be antiquated. And we have to remember that not everybody gets better in a 45-minute session once a week. We have to think about what is a comprehensive plan to better support people who are impacted by trauma and mental health and substance abuse in a way that makes sense to them. And for some people, it's a kid being able to play sports in a safe green space on the west side of Chicago. That's healing for them. And I think that what we're encouraged by is the conversations we're having around with the city and with the Chicago Department of Public Health and the public safety team around thinking really comprehensively about a behavioral health plan that doesn't just focus on clinical care, really focuses on the hard-to-reach population.
So if then not reopening those clinics as is proposed by some, what alternatives for care do you propose?
Well, it's not that and that's it. It's for sure making sure that there's expansion to a capacity, whether it's through, and leveraging state and county and other dollars too need to be funneling through. You know, our NAMI's stance is that the city need not be in the provider business, that we should make sure that the clinics, the clinical care that they're providing is well-resourced, that the staff there have what they need, the training they need, everything that they need to do this work really well so there's quality assurance, but that they should be a convener, a funder, and a coordinator of systems. We have very little coordination currently, and that lack of coordination in the siloed of these health systems is delaying opportunities for growth and system management within the mental health system. This system is so bad that people are fighting the system and they don't have energy to fight their illness anymore. I mean, we really are in a crisis, and I think that we are in a critical time and we have to think really big about opportunities here.
Arturo, what are your thoughts on
that? Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Alexa's point about the first responders, unfortunately, becoming the first line of defense. You know, this begs a question, you know, and every budget is a reflection of our city's values. So the question here is, you know, where is the safety net, right? When there are providers, when there are providers that have wait lists, when there are limitations to existing models of care, the question here is about reopening the clinics is more about restaffing those 50 clinicians that were laid off when those clinics closed. When we talk about where the city prioritizes its spending, we're talking about $6 million to increase funding for replacing those 50 therapists to be part of a bigger ecosystem of care that, of course, with the city budget, can increase access to parts of the city that do not have care. So overall, we're asking this bigger question. We're asking the question through our research. When there's been generations of disparity to access to care, how do we heal? How do we bring providers? How do we expand this conversation? In this case, we had 49 aldermen unanimously support an expanded resolution to understand what reopening mental health clinics, what would that look like in this new era in which we're trying to address the impacts of violence. So as a provider, I see the impacts on a daily basis. St. Anthony Hospital does what it can with the limited resources a hospital can provide. And so part of what we're doing is asking the question, how do we grow and how do we use this upcoming budget to think about how we plug these enormous holes that have existed for a long, long time?
Well, what do you think then of the strategy to provide mental health care as part of an integrated network rather than many standalone clinics?
So when we talk about integrated network, I think that's absolutely right. I think when we think about the entire city's landscape and the ecosystem, which is why, having NAMI coordinated helpline is very useful, right? It helps, people call one phone number in a way a 311 call could be to be able to access resources within your community. When we think about integrated care, however, we have to be very thoughtful to understand that long-term treatment that is focused on treating trauma, right? The impacts of trauma on the individual, on the family is of course linked to the issues of violence we see in the communities every day. So we have to broaden the safety net. We have to have the city successfully invest and carry out its responsibility as a safety net. I think the state impasse pointed to a bigger issue. What part of our city municipal tax dollars are we setting aside to provide this type of care in the areas of the city that we know is where it's most needed?
Are you concerned that mental health care won't be as much of a priority if it were to be a part of an integrated system?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we often see within the federally qualified health centers, there is a limitation to the medical model of treatments, right? We see that unfortunately, and we've done research and surveys on this. The limited attention that people can receive from a behavioral health provider and an FQHC is a real thing. So the question becomes, if people are not receiving that trauma treatment at their local clinic, where else are they able to access that care? So we're looking for more options.
Alexa, I'll let you have the last word. We're almost out of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what this conversation demonstrates is still a significant lack of understanding about, not from Arturo and my wonderful colleague here, who we share many similar points, but the larger conversations that recovery, that we have one opportunity to make a first impression with mental health, and that most people don't go back to treatment after their first experience because it's been so negative. So we have to really think about quality. We have to understand that housing is health care. We have to understand that purpose and supportive employment and making sure people have access to that. Because if I go to a therapist and I feel really good and I go back to an environment that's plagued with violence and I don't have that environment being invested in, my wellness will not increase. I will not be able to live in recovery.
Alexa James and Arturo Carrillo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you can visit our website for more on this story. Chicago teachers and the mayor appear to be no closer to reaching a deal that would avert a strike. Amanda Vinicky has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago tonight. Amanda.
Brandis, Mayor Lori Lightfoot says if the Chicago Teachers Union would respond to the city's contract offer, the two sides could bridge their divides. She says it has been 142 days since the CTU made a full, concrete counter-proposal.
It makes it really difficult. Otherwise, we're kind of guessing and bargaining against ourselves, which no one wants to do, nor do we. We're now got a very big clock that's ticking on both sides. We should come to the table, get these things resolved, but where it's got to start at this point is with the union coming forward with a comprehensive proposal.
Lightfoot says each passing day is an opportunity missed to make sure Chicago kids are taken care of. The CTU is set to strike a week from Thursday, October 17th, that is, along with Chicago Public Schools support staff and unionized Chicago Park District employees. A CTU spokeswoman says the union responded with 2 letters and a punctuation mark. No, she says it's ridiculous for the mayor to focus on paper pushing, but that the union has provided documentation about why CPS needs more school counselors and nurses. Chicago has finalized a deal with the city's professional soccer team. It is official. The Chicago Fire will once again play home games at Soldier Field starting next year.
Now, as Daniel Burnham said, make no little plans. We dream big. We want to invite the whole city of Chicago out to see a game next season. And on opening day, on March 21st, 2020, we'd like to fill this entire stadium, 62,000 fans. So we are inviting all of Chicago to join us as we embark on this journey to make that happen.
Ticket prices will remain flat, and that opening game will be nationally televised. The announcement comes on the anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. October 8th is also the day the Chicago Fire Soccer Club was founded in 1997. The move from the Fire Stadium in Bridgeview is costing the team some $65 million. Team owner Joe Mansueto says he wanted games at a more central location. Also staying flat, tickets to ride the Metra. The commuter rail system's proposed budget calls for no fare hikes. Metra says that's possible because it's counting on $1.45 billion in the next 5 years from the state's infrastructure program that's paid in part by higher taxes on gasoline. With that, Metra is planning to buy 400 new train cars and to rehab old stations, bridges, and the Western and California Avenue yards. As for the weather, mostly clear tonight with a low around 50. And another beautiful day tomorrow. Sunny skies and a high near 72. Now, Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, a push to ban horse-drawn carriages in Chicago. We hear from an animal rights activist and a horse carriage business owner. Inventive artwork from Chicago artists of the 1970s and beyond. Fashion Week in Chicago. We hear how the city is showcasing its homegrown designers. And pizza is on the menu at a Chicago museum dedicated to the world-famous dish. But first, some of today's top business headlines from Crain's. Here's Ann Dwyer.
Brandis, Caterpillar stock sagged toward a one-month low today. Concerns over slowing global economies drove the bellwether industrial stock downward. Analysts at William Blair & Company cut their 2019 and 2020 estimates for Caterpillar. They cited a plummeting North American construction equipment market, as well as the ongoing trade war. And there's been a big deal in the growing organic food sector. Hometown Foods, the Chicago-based company that owns the well-known Pillsbury brand, is expanding into the health-conscious food market with the acquisition of the organic baking brands Arrowhead Mills and Sunspire. Hometown today said it's bought the brands for $15 million from New York-based Hain Celestial Group. Meanwhile, a major merger in the cannabis sector went up in smoke today. Crain's reports that the all-stock merger of Chicago-based cannabis products developer PharmaCann and MedMen of Los Angeles is off. The deal was first announced in December of last year, and it set off a flurry of similar mergers in the sector over the past year. PharmaCann is now left to pursue other ways to grow the business, which includes licenses for up to 26 retail locations and 5 cultivation facilities across 6 states. For Crain's Chicago Business and chicagobusiness.com, I'm Ann Dwyer. Back to you, Brandis.
Ann, thank you. A proposal to ban horse-drawn carriages in the city was not part of the discussion at Chicago's Committee on License and Consumer Protection today. And that has some local animal rights activists up in arms. They say the industry is inhumane and outdated. Meanwhile, horse-drawn carriage operators say the animals are highly trained and meant to work. Joining us are guests on opposite sides of this debate, animal rights activist Jody Whitaker from the Chicago Alliance for Animals, and Tony Troyer, second vice president of the Horsemen's Council of Illinois and the owner of a horse-drawn carriage business in LaSalle County. Welcome both of you back to Chicago Tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you. So Jody Whitaker, let's start with you. Why should horse-drawn carriages be banned in Chicago?
There are numerous reasons, but the main reasons are that the laws on Chicago's books that are very clear are not being followed. There are horses being overworked on a regular basis, horses not provided water, horses worked when it's too hot, and many other violations that impact public safety. And these are laws that were created with the input of veterinarians and equine experts.
Tony Troyer, why should the industry not be banned in Chicago?
I think it's come to the time that, we need to update the ordinances but in a proper way, get all the people to come back, sit at the table. A lot of these ordinances were done years ago. We need to look and refresh the wording in them. We need to refresh and get the professional opinion in it. It is the only place that pretty much in the city that they can come up, kids at risk or anybody could come up and pet a horse to see the horse. The overwork issue, in my opinion, they are meant to be farm animals and be out working for long hours in a day. They become highly accustomed to what their job is.
Any particular parts of the ordinance that you think need updating?
I think a good look at all of them. I mean, a real good look at all of them. You know, the ambient temperatures that are there, I believe myself that, you know, we could, at most, we could get a more accurate temperature downtown rather than where we're taking it from. You know, the heat issues have already been scientifically proven. That's not an issue.
So what are some of the city regulations for horse-drawn carriages and limits on how much horses can work?
6 hours, 6 hours in a 24-hour period is what it says on there. I think the big misconception right now is in between the city and the carriage operators. Does that mean standing there at rest, not doing a job? Does that mean hitched to the carriage? When does that time really start? And back in the day when these ordinances were written, things were done on a handshake and had an understanding. And since then, we have had so many administration changes.
And the horses are also not allowed to work in temps above 90 degrees Fahrenheit or below 15 degrees or 0 degrees wind chill. Jody Whitaker, why are those regulations inadequate?
Because they're not being followed, for one. On the 4th of July, we went down to the horse carriage stand because it was 91 degrees at Northerly Island, which is where the law requires the temperature to be taken, and there were 3 horses being worked. Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, the city agency that's supposed to monitor and enforce the laws, was not down there. The police don't know the laws. Animal Care and Control don't monitor this trade. So we had to go down there on a holiday, and they were being worked. In August, 2 horses were overworked. Last Sunday, 2 horses were overworked. And when he says there's confusion about the law, there is no confusion. The law is very clear. In 2017, they had 334 violations. And if you look at the violations from BACP, it states the time that the horse was observed at the stand, operational until the time the horse left. And then it will say the horse was overworked, far surpassed the 6 hours in the 24-hour rule law. The horse carriage operators will say the horse worked a 20-minute ride, then they worked a half-hour ride. That is not how the city breaks down the 6-hour law.
Were these horses meant for this work, to do a job, as Tony Troyer says?
Perhaps they like to work like a lot of horse carriage operators state, but they shouldn't be working in the city of Chicago. It's a chaotic city. There are sirens all the time. There's a hospital nearby, so you have ambulance sirens, fire engines, police. You've got bus air horns, garbage trucks, motorcycles blaring by. It's not the right environment for a horse to be in. And he mentioned they're farm animals. Downtown Chicago is not a farm.
Are the horses not trained to work in these kinds of conditions? I mean, does the urban environment have an adverse impact on the horses, Tony?
Not at all. The urban environment, these horses go through a strict training protocol. They would not be okay to be out there within the traffic if there was a threat like that. I mean, the sirens, they don't even blink an eye at the sirens. They don't, at the horns that are honking. None of that. They don't. An obvious sign of a horse that is worried about something is they will literally stop and look. So if you observe the horses and if you understand them and the training that goes behind them, that's a non-issue.
Jody, the animals suffering is one thing that you and your organization have pointed out. How are you able to prove what kind of suffering the animals are experiencing?
Well, I don't know if we can prove it, but like he stated, they might be trained to work in the city and used to it, but that doesn't mean it's humane. We have been down there for 10 to 12 hours on some weekends, and we see horses hardly drinking water all day. And they're being worked sometimes more than double what Chicago's law allows. We have been there from 11 a.m. till 1 a.m. and seen the same horse working all day long. The law is clear and they're being overworked, and nobody is enforcing these laws. And that's what it comes down to, is it's not only inhumane, but they are breaking the law.
Tony?
I would disagree on the fact that, you know, just because a horse isn't drinking doesn't mean it's being deprived of water, or that some horses just will not drink. The old adage, you can lead a horse to water, can't make him drink. So, I mean, that is not an indicator. Also, the professionals. I mean, look at the professionals, the veterinarian, the farriers. They are professionals. They are the only one that can diagnose and discuss of the inhumane treatment. I mean, they know firsthand. At this point, I don't see anybody in the CAA that owns an equine and that is knowledgeable.
Jody, so what's the current status of any proposed bans? It wasn't picked up during today's Committee on License and Consumer Protection meeting necessarily, but it might be coming up. Where are we right now?
Well, the ordinance introduced by Alderman Brian Hopkins on June 12th with the new City Council has 26 official co-sponsors, and at least 32 aldermen have told us they support this humane measure. So we have the majority support in the full City Council, we have the majority support in the License Committee, and the public wants a ban. And just to follow up on what he said, is just because members of Chicago Alliance for Animals don't have horses doesn't mean we don't know how to read the law. Again, the law is clear and it's being broken.
And Jody, you've also, you recently gathered 20,000 signatures in support of this ban, presented it to the mayor's office. Have you heard back from them?
I just heard back today where they are offering a possible meeting. So I'm hoping to be able to meet with them, show them our documentation, show them that we have been documenting these horses for the last 3 years being overworked, not provided water, worked when it's too hot, and many other violations. So we are hoping to meet with them soon.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, Jody Whitaker, Tony Troyer, thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
And be sure to visit our website for a poll on what you think about banning horse-drawn carriages. Colorful and playful paintings hang next to erotic works in dark visions. An overlooked group of Chicago artists is getting their due at a museum in Elmhurst. From the 1970s onward, these artists made their mark after the Imagist work of the 60s and had gained international attention. Here's Paris Schutz with a look.
In the paintings, there are people in love, a man in anguish, and a woman made out of cake. The diverse figures in these compositions were made by artists with many interests.
Humor, a certain amount of sexuality in much of the work, playfulness, theatricality. The group that I'm talking about and the period from 1978 to 1998 was just sort of like a benchmark. They all share a kind of a common interest in figuration and emotion and painterliness to a certain degree, and that's what separates them from the original Imagist and the Harry Who. There's just that difference in visual thinking.
The Imagists and the Harry Who emerged in Chicago in the 1960s and caught the attention of the art world. This exhibit is called What Came After.
What Came After is part of an ongoing conversation about Chicago Imagism and its legacy. It's often broadly known, even internationally, but often misunderstood. Chicago Imagism as a term was used in the 1970s, and since then people have been struggling with what does that mean exactly, and that includes many artists that came afterwards, whether they built on the work of their peers or if they went beyond the expectations of that legacy.
One of those artists organized the show. She favors the term organizer over curator.
I'm from the old school, and you weren't really supposed to put your own work in a show that you were curating. So that's why I say I organized the show. It just seemed more proper because I had to include myself. I was part of that group.
Phyllis Bramson began working on the show with James Yud, the renowned art critic and teacher at the School of the Art Institute, where many of these artists studied. James Yud died in May 2018, and the exhibition is dedicated to him. This exhibit of homegrown style got local support from Chicago's Terra Foundation for American Art, and with loans from the Illinois State Museum, the Rockford Art Museum, and local collectors.
I was amazed at how individualistic each of the pieces are. One is more different than the other. It's very unique and powerful work.
The works raise questions about the underappreciated art that came after Imagism.
What happened? Why is this period just like eliminated?
What if the term Imagism was removed from Chicago's history? What would we do and how would we deal with that?
For Chicago Tonight, this is Paris Schutz.
The show is called What Came After? Figurative Painting in Chicago from 1978 to 1998. It's at the Elmhurst Art Museum through January 12th, and you can see more of the artwork on our website. And now to Amanda Vinicky and fashion in Chicago. Amanda.
Brandis, when you think of the hotbeds of high fashion, New York, Milan, and Paris probably all beat out Chicago. But that's something Chicago Fashion Week, currently in its 6th season, is hoping to change. Running through Sunday at Water Tower Place downtown, the event features runway shows that showcase everything from evening and urban wear to kids and bridal apparel. Here to tell us more is Tony Long, CEO of Fashion Bar Chicago, the group behind Chicago Fashion Week. Welcome to Chicago Tonight. And can you just begin by telling us, what is Chicago Fashion Week?
Chicago Fashion Week is a platform that Fashion Bar Chicago pushes to help stabilize the Chicago fashion industry and bring fashion designers from Chicago national.
So it is all Chicago-based designers?
Yeah, we've got some Chicago-based designers, and we also have designers from all over the world coming to Chicago because of its architecture and its lifestyle.
Why start a fashion week here when New York and Paris already have such established scenes?
Sure. Well, Chicago's got a unique environment because it celebrates inclusive diversity and culture. And so with that being said, fashion from a Chicago perspective can really go national, if not global.
What are you doing to take Chicago national, global?
Well, the things that we're doing is basically inviting press and media from all over the country, as well as working with designers from all over the world. We've got Ania's World, Tina Gifford from London. We've got several designers from California and all over the country. So they're coming here because they want to be able to showcase their line to the Chicago public.
Some people may be surprised that Chicago even has a fashion scene. What does that look like?
Chicago's fashion scene is very localized, and there are also different aspects of it that actually go national. Some of the designers that we have here from the various different schools actually partner with CDFA in New York, which they get credibility from the New York fashion industry. Whereas here in Chicago, we need to capitalize on those designers and make sure that they have the platform that Chicago can offer them.
How does Chicago fashion differ from what's available, say, in Los Angeles, New York?
Well, I think Chicago is can be a leader in fashion based on its urban wear and also its bridal wear. We've got a huge bridal market here in Chicago, as well as our urban wear designs. We've got several urban wear designers that are pushing the urban lifestyle Chicago has to offer, which is very unique from New York and LA.
How so, though? I mean, New York gets cold like we do. LA, I guess, seems different because it's always sunny, unlike as we approach the winter months. But how are we different than New York?
I think the way we're different is because we embrace the north side, the south side, the east side, and the west side. I mean, the fact that we can actually see the north side kids utilizing Chicago fashion from the south side is really remarkable because we're able to see the community embrace all aspects of what the city can offer.
What's trendy in Chicago these days?
Right now, what we're seeing a lot of is a lot of distressed denim jeans that are being refurbished or upcycled by local designers and showcasing them in a very, very fashion-forward perspective. And you're also saving the planet in the same way.
So distressed denim, what else? If I want to be in the high society of Chicago fashion, what would I be sporting?
I think some of the things would be Lauren Bridal. She's got beautiful evening gowns. She's based in Norridge, Illinois. She just showcased at our bridal show. So she's got elegant European type gowns for either a wedding, or you can even wear those gowns for a special gala or event.
All right, you mentioned one designer. Give me a couple of the other big names or those who you think might become big.
Sure. Well, we've got a designer, Morph Clothing. They've actually just featured at the BET Awards, as well as a couple of venues out in New York. They are actually coming in from South Carolina, and they're going to be showcasing their line during our Transmedia and Fashion. The garment is really unique that Morph creates. It's one garment that can be worn 22 different ways.
Those who follow fashion know that the garments, the couture featured in, say, Vogue magazine, are really pricey. What about that? Is Chicago the sort of city that is going to go along with a blazer that costs thousands of dollars? Or what do you have for people who may be just interested? They hear this segment and say, all right, I'm willing to buy something, but don't want to spend a ton of money.
Sure. I mean, I think the clothing that Chicago has to offer is marked correctly in regards to price point, and also based on the likes of what these clients are looking for. Say, for example, if someone is on a low budget and they don't want to spend the $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 in products, well, shop your local designers, because they have products under $200, under $100. You could even potentially get a wedding dress for under $1,000 if you knew how to shop the designer.
We've talked about the designers, those who are already making and creating, but what about those who want to learn? What is the fashion industry like for students, say, or on the incubator level?
Sure. Well, right now what we do is we know that Chicago has 8 to 10 fashion schools all over the city, Columbia College, SAIC, and all these schools. And so these schools are producing fashion designers, fashion merchandising individuals, and really taking them to market. What we can do is support these designers in a way that they can actually take their designs and find a career here in Chicago and not go to New York or LA or London.
Do we have the base for that, to manufacture the clothing, to sell it?
We've got the manufacturing already set up. We've got several manufacturers that do minimum quantities and low quantities. It's just making sure that the price is acceptable based on what the designer is looking for. They are already taking a risk by spending money on material, closures. Now the industry can help them make sure that the products are in demand.
Chicago Fashion Week includes a transmedia and fashion event. Can you tell us what that is and why do you offer that?
Sure. Transmedia and Fashion is a show to celebrate our trans and gender nonconforming youth. We've been doing this show for 2 years now. It's our 4th installment. We work with Howard Brown Health Clinic. And what we do is we celebrate trans and gender nonconforming in this particular show, and we really highlight them and have them model and walk in these shows. Our youngest trans model was 7 years old at the time, so we're really hoping that this helps create education, knowledge, and acceptability around our trans and gender nonconforming, and really help celebrate fashion, because fashion does not discriminate.
And also, along those lines, a modest show.
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
Modest Show is also looking at inclusion and also celebrating the Muslim community and celebrating the modest fashion that community offers. Anybody can wear either urban wear or modest wear, depending on who they are. So we want to just make sure that the platform celebrates all things fashion.
And thank you so much to Tony Long of Fashion Bar Chicago. Fashion Week, of course, runs through Sunday. And you can find more information about Chicago Fashion Week on our website. Now, Brandis, back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. An appetizing museum in Chicago will open its doors for the last time this weekend. We visited the U.S. Pizza Museum last summer when it first opened to check out the menu. Here's Jay Shefsky with another look.
The museum is loaded with unusual ingredients. They all come from the collection of a curator with a craving.
So this all started as my personal pizza collection of stuff that just kind of got out of control. And now I have it set up in a way that it tells the story of how Italian immigrants brought pizza to America and then it spread throughout the country. And we've got a spotlight on Chicago, but it's really about pizza all through the US, and we've got vintage memorabilia, menus, record albums, toys, anything you can think of related to pizza. Some of the rare things that we have here include an old Pizzeria Uno menu from the 60s that shows like a large pizza was $2.60. We've also got some McDonald's pizza memorabilia. They experimented with pizza in the 90s. I really love all of the art that was inspired by pizza. So we've got some like one-of-a-kind creations that artists have made. There's a needlepoint about pizza. I really like how that is manifesting.
Pizza Museum is free, but reservations must be made on their website. It will close its doors for good on Sunday, October 13th, but you can find out more on our website. And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, serving Chicago as a personal injury law firm since 1984.